This is Sleeping in Trees, the audiobook. Chapter 28, The Jilter Gets a Jolt. It was going to be a hostile night. I could feel it. Early yet, just after dinner, I was milling around by the garage in the dark when I heard the deep rumble of a big V8 approaching. Rolling down the street at a healthy clip was a serious flatbed utility truck with a wooden fence deck on the back. In the truck bed, I could make out Dinkle in silhouette against Junkle's patio floodlights across the street. He stood hanging onto the front of the fencing, looking ahead over the truck's cab, blond hair blowing in the wind. Butler was driving. The flatbed swerved into our driveway, braked heavily, and lurched to a stop. He killed the engine. I was used to Butler driving odd conveyances. His mother's boat factory required all manner of vehicles to move things around. I remember a small, bright green, three-wheeled Italian tricar one year. The entire family of 7 piled into it, including the dog, Brandy. They snapped a picture and sent it all over the place as their Christmas card. It was a perennial favorite, just like the card from their gorgeous Scottish neighbors who lived next door. The Italian tricar was a flawed design. With a small wheel up front and a pickup truck bed in the back, it was inherently unstable. It wanted to flip over. Before long, the oldest of the Butler boys came tearing down their steep driveway, turned sharply on some loose gravel next to the mailbox, and rolled the little buggy 3 times right into the woods across the street. We never saw the sprightly Italian tricar again. So on this particular night, the fact that Butler was driving around the neighborhood in a macho flatbed truck was no real surprise. I can best describe what followed as a simple and effective recruiting event. Butler needed help. He began his pitch. His steady girlfriend had recently dumped him for another boy, and he was in great emotional pain. I knew it was his first real girlfriend, and he was not doing well with the abrupt dismissal. This was obvious from the strained look on his face. Apparently the new beau was, at that very moment, cavorting with her at home a couple of miles away. Butler knew this, since in stalking her, he had himself witnessed the young man's arrival at the house earlier. Worse yet, he had watched her parents pull out of the driveway on their way out just prior to his arrival. Good timing or good luck? Just describing these events incensed Butler. His solution to the problem was simple. We would lay siege to the ex-girlfriend's house. Storming the premises would ruin the lovebirds' evening and terrify the new boyfriend. It would convince the young teenager, with an extreme and frightening act, that the former boyfriend was a dangerous and unstable lunatic, and dissuade the boy from ever dating the girl again. It made complete sense to me. I asked how I could help. Butler said it was simple. He had the vehicle, and now he needed some sort of pyrotechnic device. We strategized as we leaned against the flatbed in the dark. As the engine cooled, it clicked and popped. Standing up in the bed in the dark, Dinkle scanned the area and said little. Butler made it clear that while he wanted to make a lasting impression, he did not want serious property damage or bodily harm. This, we all agreed, left us with limited options. Dismissing an entire range of explosive devices, we settled on the next best plan. A combination of trenching the front lawn with a commercial-grade flatbed truck and strategically igniting 2 of my high-impact smoke bombs. In a dash, I was in and out of the house. During one of our home expansions, Dad had built a beautiful mahogany bar between the kitchen and the family room. After feeding the little animals their dinner, my parents would take their positions at the bar, have their drinks, talk and smoke. Sometimes Dad would doodle on a yellow legal pad as he designed a new tiller, a more streamlined centerboard, or another oddball invention, while Mom would smoke and read a magazine, offering up a variety of idle chatter. Because the bar was centered in the middle of the living area with a commanding view, it was virtually impossible to enter either the front or garage door and get to my bedroom outside of her view. There was apparently more to the architectural plans than good feng shui. In my entire youth, I may have snuck by on a few occasions, but Mom probably saw me and simply said nothing. Rather than even try, it was easier to just trot on through the kitchen from the garage straight into the bedroom. If it was a round trip, then there had to be a reasonable explanation, since she would always ask. There was no need for a great answer, just one that was remotely sensible and believable. That night, I did not remember my obfuscating response when she inquired, but whatever it was, it had the desired effect. With a stash of to-go pyrotechnic devices, explosive and smoke, in my underwear drawer, I tucked a couple in my pants and hustled back out through the kitchen and garage to the waiting flatbed. Butler was ready and eager. The big V8 growled to life, and we sped off down the dark street. As we drove along the road that night on the way to the Target, we happened upon a small group of boys just walking along. They must have been from another neighborhood, strangers to us. Butler pulled onto the shoulder and stopped. Standing up in the flatbed, Dinkle and I peered down at them. Butler rolled down the passenger window and asked if they needed a lift. They mumbled something, and he replied that we were on a mission and we could use their help. They agreed, scrambled up over the fence, and tumbled into the flatbed. Off we rumbled into the night. It was not long before Butler slowed to a crawl and turned a corner. This particular neighborhood looked just like ours, with large flat lots, single-story cinder block houses, white gravel roofs, sprawling green lawns, and a bush here or there, mostly tossed in as an afterthought. The South American compounds, with personal jungles encasing sprawling casas, had not yet arrived in South Miami. That tsunami was on its way, but it would be another decade before it hit the beach. All was quiet. Idling down the street, we entered reconnaissance mode, casing the house with stealth to make sure that the defense systems had not yet been triggered. The radar was still dozing. Our target was on the right. The yard was only lightly illuminated by some landscape lanterns. A single light shone in the house. It was uncomfortable to look, since we only imagined, with the house nearly dark, what the young couple might be up to. From the glow of the dash, I could clearly see Butler's pained expression. We proceeded around the block and pulled to a stop. Dinkle and I bent our heads down to the cab to listen as Butler recapped the siege plan a final time. He would pull up to the house and then roll straight ahead into the middle of the front yard, headlights extinguished. He would pause while I jumped out and sprinted quickly around the end of the driveway and into the garage. Good fortune was with us. Her parents had left the door wide open when they drove off to dinner. I would silently place 2 smoke bomb canisters in strategic locations, light them, and race back outside. On that cue, Butler would stir the beast, slam the transmission into low gear, and step on it. As I leapt into the flatbed, he would begin to weave around the front yard with 2 sets of dually tires spinning furiously at 4,500 RPM, digging 4 3-inch trenches into the loamy sod. The other neighborhood boys sat and listened without a word. They were drifting from disbelief to shock and now fear. Who are these people, they must have wondered. Time to move. Butler shifted into gear and headed toward the target. As we rounded the corner and locked in on our final approach, all was as it had been on our first pass. Very dark and quiet. Not for long. It's a strange thing to pull up in the back of a flatbed truck at night in the middle of someone's front yard, but I was quickly over it as I realized I had to leap to the ground and hightail it into a dark garage with my smoke bombs. I jumped down and moved quickly, like a skittering crab in a sideways scuttle away from the truck. I stopped momentarily midway and swiveled my head to scan the area. All quiet, nothing moved. I tiptoed into the garage. I paused for a moment so my eyes could adjust to the darkness. Their second car was in front of me, a large nondescript sedan. I could smell grass clippings. Down on my stomach, I slid a canister under the left front wheel. I lit the 8-inch long fuse with a match and wondered about gas. In a moment, I was up and around the car to the other side. I paused and watched the inside garage door to discern any sound or movement from inside. All was still. Right next to the rear wheel, I planted the other smoke bomb, lit the fuse, and again wondered about gas. Now, with 2 fuses burning like sparklers, the garage was lit in a dull, flickering light. I streaked out into the night and headed toward the flatbed. Butler saw me coming and lit up the big V8, revved it to the red line, and flashed on the bright lights. As soon as I vaulted up over the wooden fencing, he slammed it into gear. The sound was explosive, and the engine howled. The rear wheels broke free and began to spin up on the damp grass. The truck moved forward and gained speed and momentum. With the steering wheel in full lock, the flatbed began to rotate. Butler spun the wheel from full lock left to full lock right. Soon the big V8 was bellowing as the beast flipped around recklessly in wild, arcing circles. The nameless group of young boys who had so willingly accepted our lift were cowering in the corner of the flatbed in stark fear, wondering what they had gotten into. It was obvious that in their wildest imaginations they could not have envisioned that this could be the result of a free ride offered by a friendly enough young man driving a flatbed truck. I glanced at the garage while gripping the wooden fencing and, though dark, a dense yellowish smoke was clearly pouring out of the open door. I was relieved to see no flames. The entire street was now coming alive with lights. It was time to terminate the siege. Butler straightened out the wheel and headed for the road. In a few moments, spinning tires grabbed asphalt, and the flatbed, loaded with a determined assault crew and harried young hitchhikers, lurched ahead and raced out of sight. As we roared away from the target, a single car passed us, heading in the opposite direction. The journey back to our neighborhood was uneventful. I imagine, had a police officer spotted this conveyance, a flatbed truck, filled to the brim with young boys, a pursuit would have been in order, and the result may not have been pleasant. Luckily, no police were alerted, nor did any spot us as we rolled back home. En route, Butler pulled over to disgorge the hitchhikers. They were speechless and quickly tumbled down out of the truck. They hit the ground in full stride and scattered into the dark. As we approached Butler's house, the street was quiet, but we soon realized we had a serious problem. Waiting at the bottom of the driveway, with arms folded tightly across her chest, was Butler's mom. The angry scowl stretching across her face said it all. In the most unlikely of scenarios, the mother of the ex-girlfriend knew Mrs. Butler. Both were aware of the teenage breakup, and as we raced away from the scene of the siege, we had zoomed recklessly right past the girl's mother and father in our rakish, high-profile assault vehicle, just as they were returning from a most pleasant and satisfying dinner. So much for stealth mode. They recognized the crazed Butler at the wheel of the flatbed. When they pulled into the driveway, surveyed the trench front yard and the smoke-filled garage, they put two and two together and made the fatal phone call. We were busted well before we even got home. By the time the flatbed's big V8 stumbled to a stop and Butler was yanked from the cab by both ears, I had quietly slid up and over the rear fence and slunk silently into the shrubs across the street. Within seconds, I was racing home. Butler was grounded for weeks and sentenced to some lowly maintenance activities at his mother's boat factory. I didn't spot him for well over a month. Sadly, the siege was to no effect. To his disappointment, the relationship between Butler and his ex-girlfriend was not rekindled. The new boyfriend was neither intimidated nor, by any discernible measure, was his pursuit of the girl diluted in any way. It was a failed operation at all levels. I recall the reparations included resodding the former girlfriend's front yard. What was Dad thinking when he allowed Lobster to get his driving license at age 16? I recommended at least age 35, but was summarily dismissed. Up next is Chapter 29, and it's called Hard on Cars.